Welcome to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. Today I'm joined by Richmond. Richmond's in Australia, and he founded TRE in Australia, but I'm going to let him tell you about that and how that relates to the whole midlife experience as well as non-midlife experience. So welcome to you, Richmond.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Philip. So, what I'd like to just start off by sharing is putting what we're going to talk about around TRE and somatic movement in the body into a bigger context, where I often like to talk about, especially for men, you could pick lots of different categories, but I like to use words a little bit. So I like the 3 R's of relationships, regulation, and reasons. So that sense that for me, it's really important, no matter what we do, and we do a lot of healthcare, self-care practices, if we do that in isolation and we're not in relationship with other people, with our community, with the environment, then there's lots of research that shows that doing stuff just to try and help ourselves doesn't really work. It's got to fit within a bigger picture. And so that's where the reasons, if we don't have a purpose, if we're just doing things for ourselves to go, I'm doing this because I want to feel better, and then we're living a very isolated or individualistic life, the research is clear it's probably not going to be that useful. And then regulation is really the piece where what we're going to talk about today fits in, that sense of how do we regulate our system, our nervous system, or in the case we're going to talk about, how do we let our system regulate us, which is slightly a different perspective on regulation to us doing it, to using the body's own innate process to regulate and relax and restore ourselves so we can sort of not just cope with life, but also become more connected to our authentic self, who we are, and find our pathway in life.
Great. Okay. Well, before we get into that, before we really delve into that, can you share, your own experiences with, stress and anxiety? And how did you come to this? How did you come to TRE?
Yeah. So the primary introduction to me, Philip, was, and I didn't really understand what was happening, but in my probably late 20s, early 30s, my body started to break down in terms of I started to get physical injuries. My shoulders were bad. I couldn't swim anymore. I had chronic Achilles tendonitis, so I couldn't run anymore, without really bad pain. I couldn't do all the sport and exercise I used to do to feel okay. And I'd also had a couple of periods of really significant low back pain. One time, actually, when I was in the UK, where the back pain and the sciatic pain down my leg was so bad, it was affecting my ability to go up and down stairs. Like, my leg was getting weak. So it was really quite significant. And as a physiotherapist, as a background, I'd just been told this was just mechanical tension and you just had to change all that. But I had done everything I could possibly do, in terms of all my physical training. I'd tried lots of different treatments, and one of my brothers sent me off to a 10-day Vipassana meditation course, so a silent meditation course. And the key element of that was it was about meditating into the sensations and the feelings in the body. And on one of those, I did a few of those courses, and on one of those courses, my body started to spontaneously move. So when I was sitting still, at some point, my body started to just sort of rock forwards, and it caught me instantly because I'm like, hang on, I'm not doing that. And it was a bit confusing because I'm like, am I just relaxing? Am I shifting forwards? And then as my body sort of started to move forwards, and lots of people experience this when they meditate and sit still. And then just when I thought I was going to fall forwards, my body sort of jolted, and then it started to move me backwards. And again, I had this really, I had no context or understanding what was happening, but I could tell that my body was moving itself and I wasn't doing it. So I snuck back into the hall at night, because you're not meant to move in this meditation practice. So I went back in late at night when there was no one there. And when I just went into this state of observing my body, it started to move, and then my arm started to move itself and spiral and stretch. And within maybe half an hour, my body was stretching and moving itself spontaneously, with me just kind of letting it happen and watching it. And, my arms were like spinning up around the back of my head, more flexibility than I could have ever done on my own. And so that really sparked off this journey of going, hey, there's something happening where when I get out of the way, and this is really significant for, especially I think for us as men, when I got out of the way of my body and I just came along for the ride, it was able to release tension and free me up and create movements that I could never do from my consciously directed mind. And that was really the introduction to go on this journey. And that key thing of, as a physiotherapist, I've been told it's up to me to fix my body. And certainly there's lots of things we can do, but this was the doorway into something else. There's something already inside me, which is, it's like doing the healing or doing the even the growth, even the physiological growth as children from being babies and our bodies growing. It was starting to connect in and tap into that sort of life force or organism, the wisdom in the organism or the wisdom in the body that I'd never been introduced to before.
So had you tried other methods? It sounds like you're in a lot of pain and it was a condition that wasn't getting any better. Had you tried other sorts of techniques? I mean, was this the first time something like this had happened to you?
Yeah, so I'd done a lot of other therapies, basically. I'd done a bit of counselling. I'd done a bit of all sorts of body-based things. And yeah, this was really this moment where what happened was, because all of those therapies often were externally being done to my body, but even when they were being done to my body, there was something inside me that wasn't able to let go. It was still just holding that level of tension. And I never realised until I sort of started to do this work and learn more about it, is that I was someone, Philip, who'd been living with high functioning anxiety, probably my whole life, but really significantly through on from a period of living in extreme fear and hypervigilance at boarding school as a young teenager. So, yeah, I didn't realise that all this stress and tension that was inside me and just this chronic pain, I just thought it was just physical pain. And one of the most fascinating aha moments was after doing TRE for a number of months and my body was starting to free up, I recognised that I had 2 periods of really bad back pain in my life, as I say, to the point where I couldn't go up and down stairs. If I sat in a car for 2 hours driving, I might have to lie down on my belly for a day afterwards. And at some point, it came to me one day, I think while I was just tremoring, I just had this little aha moment, that both of those times of back pain where I'd, supposedly slipped a disc or whatever someone might say, had both happened within 6 weeks of breaking up with my first true love and what I would call my second true love. And so it was only, 15 years later, I was like, wow, isn't that fascinating? Those 2 periods were, directly related to that. But of course, I had no idea about that. I was like most of us. I was just trying to muscle on. I was trying to keep up with everyone. I was trying to have run a job, we had a family with a young child at the time. And I was just pushing and pushing. But there was this really clear sense for me, it was like, I can't keep up. I can't keep doing this. And so I had no idea that what was underlying it was all this sort of, again, high functioning anxiety on the outside. I look like I'm a physiotherapist. I'm educated, relatively intelligent. I've got capacities and skills. I should be doing really well. But internally, I'm just grinding down here. And that was really the turning point, was having to find a different way. I couldn't just keep muscling through things. And because my body was breaking down, I couldn't just keep using sport and exercise to feel good and get the endorphins. It sort of literally brought me to that halt. I like to say, my body took me into this deeper place where I had to sort of connect with and start to deal with that deeper stress and anxiety.
So are you saying then that, I know you referred to time of boarding school and then to, traumatic events, I guess, related to relationships. So are you saying there's a link then between, trauma in your life and then how that then manifests in perhaps your nervous system or, how you manage with stress and anxiety? Is there, is there a direct link there that you may not have any idea is going on in the background?
Yeah, absolutely. That is 100% exactly what we're saying. And one of my favourite sayings, Philip, is that stress and trauma is a verb. So a lot of people think about trauma. It's like something happened, it's stuck inside me like the proverbial water inside the bucket. Whereas the way I like to explain it to people is when we have a traumatic experience and the body goes into a protective, basically tension, freezing, tightening up. And that is an active process in the moment. And what happens with stress and trauma is our body then continues to activate those tension patterns, just to keep it really simple. It keeps activating those tension patterns long after the event is finished. And so in that sense, if someone walks through the door and I start to feel anxious, that's a verb in that my body is generating a feeling of I need to flee, I need to flee, I need to flee. And why that's so important is when we recognize that effectively, post-traumatic stress, most mental health conditions have this underlying history of trauma. And by that, it could be, and when we look at trauma to the body, not just to my mind, so that goes from, in utero, birth experiences, early childhood, that we're never going to have a story for. So we can analyze it to, the cows come home. But if our nervous system, for want of a better word, has learnt to inhabit and activate itself in a certain way, then years later we're going, I'm just getting this fear response. I'm feeling anxious because the nervous system's learnt this is what we have to do, and it's maintaining those survival mechanisms. And the reason why that's so important is it's obvious that none of us are consciously choosing to be stressed or to be anxious or to be angry or to be frozen or overwhelmed or shut down. It's not a conscious choice. It's for want of a better word, a reflex in the body. But what most of us haven't really been educated in the traditional sort of psychotherapeutic model from the old days and psychoanalysis and all that, is that the body also has a similar unconscious pathway to release or let go of or come out of those protective states. Basically, at the most simple level, is the body has a way to release the tension itself without me having to, do it. On a digestive level, like if we have a burp or if we have a fart, it's not like I'm sitting there going, we can consciously do those things to some degree, but it's not like I'm sitting there going, I need to burp, I'm going to do a burp. It's something that just happens in the organism. Or, we might feel our body take a huge big breath because we're a bit tight and we don't even know. And then all of a sudden the body just, there's a big sigh. The same with laughing and crying. So that there's these processes going on unconsciously, and we often get stuck in the protective or the stress response without then allowing the body to complete the cycle and come out of it. And the reason why we don't do that is because the way the body releases those stress and trauma responses is through spontaneous shaking and tremoring. And we've all been told that shaking and tremoring is a sign of shock. So you want to stop it. Someone's had a car accident. Let's put a blanket on them. Stop that. If we're shaking and tremoring while we're public speaking, we've all been told that's just anxiety. And so what's happened in Western culture is that we have pathologized the recovery or the relaxation response of spontaneous shaking and tremoring. And when you close that door, then the body has lost its ability to downregulate or relax itself and let go of those patterns. So, we're designed to go into a stress or a defensive protective response, and then we're designed to come back out of it. Just like a dog shaking in a thunderstorm. Yes, it's had some fear, but the shaking is not helping its body to fight or flee or to freeze. The shaking is the body's recovery response. And the dog lets it happen, and then it relaxes and it's gone and it's done and the body's back to a calm state. But we as humans, especially in the Western world or primarily in the Western world, we have been taught not to do that. And the classic thing is the stiff upper lip. Don't let the lip tremble. Don't let them see that you're feeling weak or scared or anything like that.
So is it a subconscious? It's subconscious then. So, for example, if you burp, there are gases produced during digestion, and you don't consciously do it. But is this more related to the brain as an organ, or I guess you're holding stress though in different parts of your body, aren't you? Is it how does it work in terms of the you're talking about repressing this kind of shaking, subconscious shaking. But is that coming from your brain, or is it coming from learned behavior? Is it coming from other parts of your body?
Yeah, so it's very much the suppression of the shaking is very much a cultural thing. And then we learn to do that individually, and then it sort of just becomes part of our baseline state. So the TRE founder, David Berceli, when he was traveling around the world and having all these different experiences, one of his sort of foundational stories, Philip, was he found himself one day in a bomb shelter in a civil war somewhere in Africa. I can't remember what country, but everyone would go into the bomb shelter and there was an air raid. And as the planes were coming and dropping bombs, he said it was absolutely terrifying. The whole place was shaking. But as he looked around, he noticed that all the young children were shaking uncontrollably. And then the teenagers a little bit and the adults not shaking at all. And so then afterwards they survived, and he asked the adults, he said, do you adults ever shake when the bombs are coming? And they said, no, we don't want the kids to know that we're scared. And that was a critical moment where he realized for himself, was like, wow, this is what's happening. We're suppressing this. And even in the terms that we use and what I just used there, the children had uncontrollable shaking. And so that sense of they're not in control. And this is where this fits to men, where we're supposed to be in control all the time. We're meant to be in control of ourselves. We're meant to be in control of our world, which is meant to be in control of everything. And so for most of us, we've inherited this model, again, in the Western world, because in a lot of traditional cultures, they don't have this pathologization of shaking tremoring. They deliberately use it and integrate it for healing and spirituality and all sorts of things. But for most of us, again, and this was for me, it's like if I've got stress and trauma, I've got to control it. I've got to make sure if I'm angry, I've got to control it. And that's true in the sense of if I'm angry, I don't want to just be going, I'm going to act like a child and be angry at everyone and smash things and do. But when we suppress that, then it's like, well, how do I let go of this internal tension inside me? Like, where does that? And so this is this whole flip side to doing things and doing self-care practices to learning how to let go and allow the body to move itself. So I personally found it was like, it's like finding the keys to the jail cell, where all of a sudden on that meditation course, when my body started to move, I was like, wow, when I get out of the way and I stop trying to do it and I'm just present, my body is moving me back to a better place of, relaxation and reconnection than I could ever do on myself. And that's significant for us as men. It's like, yeah, we want to learn we want to be controlling, we want to be in control, but we also want to have the other end of the spectrum, which is going, how can we let go?
So how do, men listening to this or anyone listening to this, where do you kind of start? Because first of all, it's probably quite an alien concept to a lot of people to probably meditate. Not people know about meditation, but I don't think many people actually do it. And then secondly, the thought of uncontrollably shaking, in public is terrifying for most people because of the social stigmas. So how do you start doing this then? Presumably you do it in a quiet environment, probably within your own home, but how people listening to this thinking, well, I'm a million miles from getting to that state. How do they kind of start to get to the point where they can start to experience it?
Yeah, and this is one of the beauties of TRE, and there's lots of other modalities and self-care practices. Katsujun Undo, regenerative movement in Japan, or the Kalahari Bushmen use different techniques. But this is what's beautiful about TRE is we just use muscle fatigue to start to connect to that little shaking experience. So anyone who's ever been to the gym or done yoga or Pilates or done rock climbing, we all know that experience when the muscles start to just quiver and shake because they're a little bit tired. And so most people lying down on the floor, you can do it lots of different ways, any muscle group, but generally just end up lying on the floor with the knees apart, lifting the knees up so that the muscles start to shake and vibrate. And so the beauty about that is we bypass the cognitive thinking mind. So we're not going, you have to think about it or tell your story or talk about what happened or how you feel about it. We just go straight to the body. And then once we use that little bit of postural tremor or muscular fatigue, rather than then stopping it. So again, if you're at the gym and you're shaking, you're like, I've got to stop that. Or if you're doing Pilates and shit, we're going to stop that. We just say, we're going to let that happen. And we're going to let that build up. And so the other element about TRE is rather than it being uncontrollable, as soon as your body starts to shake a little bit, we slide the legs out and the tremors stop because you take the muscles off load. So you're like, oh, hang on, I can let go and let this, uncontrollable is not quite the right word. I can let this spontaneous shaking occur. But the minute that if it doesn't feel comfortable, I can stop it. I'm like, I'm in control of the letting go of control. And so with TRE, that's a key thing where we're teaching people, how do we access this shaking experience? So we're like, it's not freaking me out. I'm not panicking. It's not overwhelming. And it's like learning to push the brake in a car. Oh, I can let this start to speed up. I can let it start to move. And then if it feels too much, I can stop it. And from that place, then we go, wow, this letting go is not dangerous. In fact, this feels good. I'm feeling more relaxed. I'm feeling more free. And so then we're able to let go. And very, very quickly, Philip, for most people, within one session, they'll get to the point where they're like, oh, I trust this. I'm okay. There's no stress. There's no drama here. I can just let go. And then at that point, it's up to the body to start to find and unwind the stress and the tension patterns. And most of the time, people don't necessarily have any particular memory or thoughts, or it's not associated things. So it's not like a trauma release, even though it's called TRE is originally trauma release, but it's not about the story, or it's not necessarily about it's more about the emotions or catharsis. It's about letting the body just take its natural, efficient pathway to coming out of those protective states. Your shoulders are tight up around your neck. We don't even know they're tight until we get a massage and you're like, oh my God, there's so much tension. Or most of us don't know that we're carrying these tension patterns unconsciously in the body until they start to cause secondary conditions like my back pain. But the underlying issue is this sense that our nervous system is in this chronic state of defense or protection or stress or trauma. And by re-accessing the body's way to come out of it, it's incredibly empowering because I can lie on the floor at home, I can lie in bed at night, bring on this little shaking, tremoring reflex, and it helps to switch off the nervous system, calm the mind, let the body breathe more freely and release more tension so we can sleep more fully, recover better.
Is this a one, because you said after the first session, a lot of people, see the benefit. What sort of things are you noticing if you're doing this? Is it a kind of, if you've got 30 years, 40 years of built up stress, how are you going to wait? You're going to come around from the session and go, wow, I feel incredibly light? Or does it take, do you have to build it into your daily life and it takes months? I mean, give us an idea of, not that you're, I won't use the word, curing anything, but if you're certainly making yourself feel better and different, how long would you expect it to take?
Yeah, so there's kind of layers to it. So the first thing is that if we're in a chronic state of stress and tension, which most of us in the Western world are living to some degree, and by that, like everyone listening to this, we can say, I'm not stressed, I'm feeling really quite calm and relaxed today. But if I was to come around and put my elbow into your buttock or push into your shoulder, your shoulder blade, and you're like, oh my God, that's really tense and painful. So we're going, that's stress. That's trauma that the body's stressed, but it's just my conscious mind's not aware of it. And so when we recognize that most of us are chronically, physically stressed, that our body's carrying this chronic tension, when we do the tremoring and we sort of the body switches that off, it's like, oh, we don't have to maintain that. Most people have pretty much an instantaneous experience of, oh my God, I feel more relaxed. I feel calmer. I feel more connected to my body. I feel more free. But what we then need to do is over time, we're wanting to retrain the nervous system to function at a more relaxed, more grounded, more, efficient state. And so like anything, like going to the gym, once you learn this, to access this sort of reflex or response in the body, then it's really simple and easy just to keep using it. Again, because you don't have to meditate, so you don't have to use mental focus. Like at the end of the day, working on the computer, most people don't want to meditate. It probably would be good for them, but we don't want to do it. Or if you're a first responder or you're stressed and tired because you've been working hard up late, the kids have been, most people, it's going to be great to go and do a yoga or a Pilates session, but we're like, I'm exhausted. And the beautiful thing about this is that once you just lie down and let your body start to shake and tremble, it doesn't take any mental effort or physical effort. The body does it itself. And so it's something incredibly easy to integrate into our lives without going, oh, here's another thing I've got to do. You go to the gym and most of the time, or you go for a run, it's like, oh, it doesn't feel so good while I'm running, but I know I feel good afterwards. But with the tremoring, what tends to happen is that it feels good in the moment. So it's not something that's a burden. It's like, oh, wow, this feels good. I'm feeling the release, the relaxation. I might do it last thing at night in bed, or even if I wake up in the middle of the night to help relax and, switch the system off. So there's that short-term impact, and people can have extraordinary changes where, we can have chronic pain, and when the nervous system switches off that output of pain and protection, people are like, wow, God, that's gone. And it can be like that.
Well, I wanted to drill on that a bit because that was fascinating at the beginning when you were saying that you had this chronic pain and then your body just started moving and, you said your arms were moving over the place. So people listening to this who do suffer from chronic pain, what I appreciate you said this can really help them. But you at the beginning you were saying, your body was doing things it had never done before or haven't done for a while, and can they expect that? And is that then rewiring is that rewiring that chronic pain? So eventually it kind of dissipates.
Yeah, so when we think about pain, again, we tend to think of it as a noun, like I've got pain, there's something inside me. Whereas again, pain is a verb. So pain is an output of the nervous system, and all the latest research is very, very clear about this. It doesn't mean that pain's not real, but it's something that the nervous system is generating that we then become conscious of. So I say this, if I've been bitten by a black dog as a child and I've got anxiety about dogs, someone brings me in a fluffy white puppy and my body is going, I've got to get away, even though there's no danger. And pain is similar because pain is generally designed to do one of two things. It's either in the acute phase is designed to make us move. So you touch the hot plate and your hand pulls back. There's pain and it pulls away. But in the chronic phase or the long-term phase, chronic pain is about getting the body to not move. So if you've broken your ankle, you're like, don't move, don't move. And so the body is generating the pain to make sure that we don't move. And so then what happens with chronic pain is movement starts to become scary, effectively. Like, oh, don't bend over because that's going to hurt my back. And so we stop moving and there's that chronic cycle. And this, again, is where the body, to be healthy, wants to move. And when we allow the shaking and tremoring to do it, or the body to unwind, to restore the movement and let go of the chronic bracing and tension, the body does that in its own way. So it's very common that the associated secondary experiences of chronic pain start to reduce and switch off. And that was my own experience, Philip. When I got introduced to TRE, I'd been teaching Pilates full time for about 5 years, and my back pain, my back was incredibly functional. I was strong. I could do everything, but it pretty much ached all day. But so that little pain element was still there, but I was strong and flexible. And then when I got introduced to TRE, I started having mornings where I'd wake up and I'd think, wow, I just woke up and my back's not sore. And I'll never forget, there was one particular time where we had a massive storm where I live, trees all over the road. So I had to go out with the chainsaw to clear some of the road. And after about 20 minutes, my back is starting to really hurt. And at that point, up until that point, I would have stopped and said, right, that's enough. I need to have a break. I'll go and, come back tomorrow. Whereas this day, because we had to keep clearing everything, I was just like, I just have to keep going. I'm going to keep going. I ended up doing about 3 or 4 hours of chainsawing. And in my mind, I was like, I am not going to be able to walk tomorrow. I'm going to be in so much pain, because that had been my experience before learning TRE. And so that night, I remember lying down on the floor with the kids. We were watching a movie. I was just having a bit of a shake and a tremor for, might have been 20 minutes, half an hour. I went to bed. And then the next morning when I woke up, I didn't have any pain, but not only did I not have pain, I felt 100% more flexible and free in my back than I'd ever have. So not to say that that's what everyone experiences, but for me, I was like, wow, this is like switching off that stress and trauma and pain response. It didn't mean that now I'm healed and I'm enlightened and everything's perfect. I then had to go on that journey, but recognizing that sense of, wow, when the body's able to release itself, then that's, taking care of a huge amount of all the unconscious problems we have. Again, I always like to say this is, if you've got conscious control over your pain or your stress or your anxiety or your frustration or your anger or your overwhelm, if you're in conscious control of it, then just let it go. Just let it go and get on with your life and have the most amazing life ever. But the limit is that, and for everything that we can consciously do, Philip, I'm like, yeah, meditate, relax, change your mindset, change your thinking, do all those things. And if it's 100% effective, then you don't need to do any TRE. But where this comes in is all of that stuff that we don't have the conscious control over. This is where adding in this somatic body, true bottom-up approach of letting the body unwind that itself, it's going to, work from both directions. So what I can consciously control and choose, it's also then going to start to work with all that stuff in my body and my life that I can't consciously control or choose, and it's going to help and support. And by adding the tremoring in, it doesn't replace going to the gym, and it doesn't, replace changing your mindset or counseling. It doesn't replace any of those things, but it makes a huge difference when the nervous system is starting to optimize itself and reorganize itself over time. So we get on this trajectory of like, wow, I'm healing. I'm getting more efficient. My back's getting stronger. So that's where, because it's so simple and easy, once people learn it, you're like, it's in you. It's there for life. It's a resource that most of us are not only not accessing, but we're suppressing it and preventing it from helping us.
Would this happen when you're asleep? Because you don't have any conscious control over your body. I guess you wouldn't know. But are there instances where your body starts to take over when?
Yeah, so it's quite common, well, not uncommon, that when people are first learning this, that we might wake up in the night and we're like, oh wow, my body was shaking in the night. I had lots of experiences of that. And in a way, a similar thing happens, when we have nightmares or night terrors, and we're like, that's a symptom. We're like, no, that's when where conscious mind's out of the way, and the body's like, right, now we've got a chance to let go of stuff and integrate things. By the time we wake up and the heart's pounding, we're like, oh my God, I'm feeling so scared and anxious, rather than going, oh wow, my heart's pounding, I'm having this release or this discharge of that stress and anxiety. So yeah, you're 100% right. And in a lot of cultures, and even in our own Western culture, we often use what David Berceli, the TRE founder, used to call ego-loosening devices to get to that state. So things like ayahuasca or peyote or alcohol or drugs to get ourselves out of the way, our ego and that part of us that keeps everything locked down in control. In my era, more so, it's like people would get drunk, you lose a bit of your inhibitions, and all of a sudden you can dance and you free up and everything feels amazing. And so this is more of a natural way of learning. How can we get out of the way and let this process happen? Again, you think about dogs, they do this multiple times a day. There's incredible research showing when dogs do that little shake for where it looks like they're shaking off water, but they only do it when they're starting to get more stressed. And what it does is as soon as they do that little shake, it changes the direction that their heart rate is going in. So instead of the heart rate getting up higher and higher, they do that tiny little 2-minute shake, and it doesn't just instantly drop their heart rate, but it starts to calm the whole system down. So this is something that as humans, as mammals, we are meant to have this little, shaking tremor is meant to be part of our lives. And this is where, because TRE is so simple and easy and doesn't take effort, once you learn it, you're like, yeah, I'm a bit stressed today. I've had a tough day at work. What can I do? Oh, I'm just going to lie down on my bed or on the floor, let my body shake for 5 or 10 minutes, switch that off, find more freedom and relaxation. So it's an incredibly empowering resource that's inside all of us, all men, all people, all listeners, but most of us are not using it for our own benefit.
So it sounds like it's relevant to everyone, really. I mean, I guess, yes, if you are conscious that you're holding a lot of stress and anxiety, but actually, as you said, in everyday life, perhaps you're a bit, unfulfilled and, don't know what direction to take in your career, for example, or your relationship, etc. I guess this is a kind of a complementary kind of process that you can apply just to get yourself in a better state. It's not going to solve your problems, but it's going to help get your mind in a better place.
Yeah, massively. And you're right. It's like if you've got a body and a nervous system and we've got this ancient reflex that's evolved in every single one of us, then of course it's going to be helpful and beneficial for all people. And, I love that you're mentioning that sense of like a lot of people use it for creativity. So they'll lie down, they're a bit stressed. I used to find this all the time. I'd be like a bit stuck. I'm not sure what to write, what to do in an email or some, presentation. And as our system calms down, and this is kind of what happens with meditation as well, is that as our system calms down, then all of a sudden we have these little moments of insight. And if you look at what happens with the brain waves where they gradually slow down, and then when we have a little aha moment, the brain has a little buzz and it's like a quick little, spark comes out of your intuition. And yet at the other end of the spectrum, we also have a lot of professional athletes. So in Australia, we have, AFL footballers and Olympians who use this process as a recovery process for their, sports recovery and performance. And then you've got everyone else who's just going, oh, I'm just generally a bit stressed and I want to get more connected. And I think, so it's relevant to everyone, but specifically to men, where we're so used to having to hold everything and think about holding everything in basically means tension. Like what are we we're holding expression. And it's not just about emotion, it's about movement and freedom in the body. And so what my experience has been, and I see this with everyone who starts to use this process, is we tend to get more connected to who we really are, like our authentic selves. Now, that may be, in my example, that I became much more aware of really internally. I had a lot of unresolved anxiety. But as we keep working through that and we keep releasing and regrounding and regulating the system, we also go, wow, deeper in under there, there's also a regulated nervous system that can cope and can recover. And so it helps us, as you sort of say, it helps us not just cope, but to get more connected to who we are and what am I passionate about? What is my purpose? You know, how can I be more myself in relationship with others and the world? So especially when people are going through transitions or, like a divorce or a separation or a career change, or grief is another one where this is a huge area where we do not let the body move and express. It's natural to cry and let the body shake and tremble as a way of letting go of grief, whether that's a lost loved one or a pet or a change in a relationship or a dog, your dog dying or a change in job or something, losing a job. So it's about reawakening this natural pathway that we all have to help us get more connected to ourselves for however people want to experience or think about that.
If people want to find out more, I mean, I've seen your website, your TRE Australia website. Are there, do people do this together, or to see practitioners, or is there? Presumably there's information online that people can look at if they want to, really understand more about this.
Yeah, so there's three main ways, and there's TRE providers in about 85 countries around the world. So lots of people learn it in a workshop. So, it might be a 1-day workshop or a 2-day workshop or a couple of hours where you'll go in a group, get educated, get taught how to use it and how to regulate it. Some people who've got more of a history of, more acute trauma or mental health issues will often learn one-on-one, like in a, not therapy session, but in a one-on-one sort of consultation. But one of the other ways, and this is what I'm really passionate about, Philip, and one of the positives of COVID was when we all couldn't teach people face-to-face during COVID, we started teaching people online via Zoom, which worked really well because we're not physically having to do things to get the tremoring going. We can work with the body hands-on, but in order to empower people with the technique, you can just do it via Zoom. But during COVID, when I couldn't work at all, so I created an online course, and at that stage, it was the first online course of its kind in the world. And then over the last 3.5 years, it's been about 14,500 people have done that online course. So for people who like self-guided learning for less than the price of a single session, you can go in and get 3 guided sessions, get a little bit of the background theory so you can learn how to access the shaking reflex and then use it on your own. And that course is at trecourse.com. It's got some free videos and stuff at the start so you can get a feel for it. But this is what I'm most passionate about because it's not about you relying on me. It's not saying I'm not the holder of the skills and you need to see me for the treatment all the time. It's going, this shaking reflex is in you. And my main passion is saying, I want to teach you how you can use it so you don't have to keep paying me all the time. And that's where the online course at trecourse.com is so efficient and effective because you can follow it along at your own time. You get the guided sessions. And by the end of that course, you're going to know the basics that you can just then keep using it on your own for the rest of the life. And I'm about to release, this was at the end of last year, I've developed an advanced course where there's 12 guided sessions, which will just help people integrate a whole lot of things like breathing techniques or different positions so that you can keep deepening the process so your body is opening up and releasing and relaxing and reorganizing even more effectively than just lying down in the same position all the time.
Okay. Well, we'll put those links in the episode notes as well. Thanks, Richmond. So just maybe we could just finish, and I know you've kind of talked about this already, but just to reiterate, someone listening to this thinking, wow, I want to have a go at this. As soon as I stop listening to this podcast, I'm going to go next door. So just reiterate what's a really simple, easy way just to dip your toe in and just see if this is for you.
Yeah, so look, what I would recommend again is go and check out some of the videos at the online course at trecourse.com. And the reason I say that, Philip, is because most of us haven't had the association with shaking and trembling as a positive thing and will be a bit uncertain. And so for the vast majority of people, getting a little bit of the theory, seeing how they're doing it, and most importantly, learning to go, oh, I can surrender into this and let it happen. But then this is how I stop it so I can regulate. That's going to be, really effective. I mean, if you find yourself spontaneously shaking after a car accident or a traumatic event, then I would say just dive into it, let it happen, you're okay. But most people benefit from learning how to regulate it so they feel more comfortable and relaxed and in control of it. And that's really what the TRE course, the online TRE course, is there for.
Well, Richmond, thank you. It's been really fascinating. We'll put all that information in the episode notes. But just thank you. Thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on, and happy tremoring.
Thank you for listening to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. If you want to find out more about TRE, just search online. And to find Richmond, visit the website treaustralia.com and search for Richmond Heath. To help raise the profile of the podcast, it really helps if you can review the show, and please do share it through your own networks. If you have a story to share, then do contact me through the website mid-lifemen.com. There's also a book called Men Speak Up, Journeys Through Mental Health, based on the podcast, and it's available on Amazon and through other online retailers.